Hello and welcome to another Infinity Tactical Considerations video. Today I will be examining the classified deck for the Infinity Tournament system. I will examine each card in the classified deck, focusing on the designated trooper that is required to complete that objective. I will display a collection of designated troopers from the Nomad faction that fulfill the requirements. I will present a summary of how many cards designated troopers complete from the deck, and I will use an example from my list for what troopers I include when considering the mission and classified objectives. Finally, I will list how many classified cards are used for each RTS 15 scenario that use the classified deck. During Infinity N2, specialist troopers were available but were not widely used in a shooting game. The introduction of objective-type missions encouraged players to include specialists in one's army list. Eventually, a new game format appeared during RTS seasons and included a secondary objective to complete. The introduction of classified objectives, I think, was to increase the use of specialist troopers in army lists. In RTS Season 8, for example, there were only 10 classified objectives, which were Data Scan, Sabotage, Experimental Drug, Telemetry, Test Run, Extreme Prejudice, HVT Espionage, HVT Retro Engineering, HVT Inoculation, and HVT Designation. In the current version, there are now 20 classified objectives. The introduction of secondary objectives allows players to have an alternative method for scoring objective points in RTS missions. Often these would narrow the win-loss ratio between players during tournaments. The aim, I think, was to make tournament scoring more balanced between players and certain factions. I will now briefly present each card individually, using the Nomad faction to illustrate which troopers can complete the classified objective for that card. Feel free to pause the video to look at the troopers for longer. First card is HVT Follow-Up. The designated trooper for this card is Medium Infantry and Heavy Infantry. And as you can see on the right is all the troopers from the Nomad lists, or the Nomad faction, that can complete this objective. Net Undermined is next, and the designated trooper is Veteran Troop, Elite Troop, or Chain of Command. HVT Identity Check. Designated troopers are troopers with a biometric visor, a multispectral visor, or a sensor. Capture. Designated troopers are Veteran Troop, Elite Troop, or Chain of Command. You will find some of these will be repeated throughout the classified deck. HVT Kidnapping. Designated trooper is Veteran Troop, Elite Troop, or Chain of Command, same as the previous card. HVT Inoculation. Again, the designated troopers are doctors or paramedics. Sabotage is a trooper with decharges. Combat Support. The designated trooper is a doctor, paramedic, or an engineer. HVT Espionage requires a hacker to complete this objective. And as you can see here, all the troop types that have the hacker profile. HVT Reverse Engineering is for the engineers in the troops, in the lists. Industrial Espionage involves the engineer, a forward observer, a veteran troop, or an elite troop. So it's quite a large selection of troopers that can be used to complete this objective. Nano Espionage. The designated trooper is engineer, doctor, or paramedic. Mapping would use either a forward observer or a hacker. Data Scan requires a hacker. HVT Designation requires a forward observer. It consists of a designated trooper, but they will have the forward observer skill or the spotlight hacking program, which basically narrows it down to either a forward observer or a hacker. Obviously, hackers with a killer hacking device are unable to complete this objective. telemetry, again Forward Observer or Spotlight hacking program, so Forward Observers or hackers, except for a killer hacker device, for the troopers with a killer hacking device. Predator, obviously any trooper can complete this, because all you have to do is just make sure you achieve at least 2 unconscious states or dead states. So for example, if you're committing in close combat CC attack, then either you cause a unit to take 2 wounds, which will put it into the dead state, or one situation of putting a trooper into that is in close combat unconscious, and then moving to another one and putting that into unconscious. The easiest, I dare say, would be to just have a trooper with a very high burst in CC and just try to get that dead state. Suspected infiltration. The designated trooper is a doctor, hacker, veteran troop, or an elite troop. Again, a large selection of troopers from the Nomads, for example, can complete this secondary objective. Vigilance, medium infantry or heavy infantry. And finally, HVT assassination. The designated trooper is the lieutenant, or a trooper with NCO skill or chain of command. So obviously you would not want to place your lieutenant in a risky situation to complete this objective. You would be better off using a trooper with the NCO skill or the chain of command skill, which would be much preferred. Okay, so now I'll provide a summary of which trooper types complete how many cards in the deck, just to make it a bit easier to understand. So heavy infantry, medium infantry will complete 2 objectives. Veteran troops, elite troops will complete 5. Hacker, including those that require the hacking spotlight program, will complete 6 cards. Engineer will complete 4 cards. Forward observers and doctors paramedics will also complete 4 cards. Troopers with decharge will have 1 card to complete. Chain of command will have 4. NCO and lieutenant will have 1, and biometric visor and multispectral visor will have 1 as well. So now I'll use some examples of Nomad profiles that I use in my lists that cover most of the classified deck. Starting with the Grenzer, generally I use the Forward Observer Trooper. As you can see, he's a veteran troop type. He's also medium infantry. The Grenzer comes with a multispectral visor and is also a Forward Observer with sensor and NCO skill. So this means the Grenzer can complete 13 out of 20 cards, making this trooper accomplish 65% of the classified deck. Another trooper I use often is a mobile Brigada Hacker. He's a veteran troop and a heavy infantry. His equipment includes the hacking device and comes with decharges. This means the mobile Brigada Hacker can complete 14 out of 20 cards, making this trooper accomplish 70% of the classified deck. And finally is the Reverend Healer. She is a medium infantry and an elite trooper, and also has the doctor skill. So the Reverend Healer can complete 11 out of 20 cards, making this trooper accomplish 55% of the classified deck. So with these 3 troopers alone, I can accomplish 19 out of 20 cards. The only classified I cannot accomplish for this example is HVT reverse engineering, because that requires the troop that is an engineer. Now if I add in a evader engineer, then obviously those 4 troopers alone can complete all the cards in the deck. So these 3 troopers that I've just shown are generally in my lists, because they also are the main troopers that complete main objectives during the missions. And obviously some of those missions will provide either a hacking or a doctor bonus. So here's a list of the scenarios that include classified objectives from the classified deck. So it's in alphabetical order, and as you can see, generally most missions will have 1. The missions that are more shooting in nature, such as biotech war, firefight and frontline, they'll generally have 3 or 4 cards. Most objective heavy missions, such as last launch, looting and sabotaging, mine wipe and panic room, or B-Pong for example, will just have 1 extra card. And continuing on. So the only exception are 2 missions, countermeasures and highly classified. These 2 missions require the use of the classified deck to score objective points, and they have important scenario rules for selecting which objectives are needed for the main objectives. Obviously, as you'll notice if you've added up, there's 2 missions missing, and that is decapitation and unmasking, because they are the only missions that do not require secondary objectives. So in sum, most trooper profiles can complete more than one secondary objective, which is good to know. The default choice is which trooper profile you want to include in your list. This links in with the next point. You need to ensure you have the correct specialist for the mission in the tournament or casual game. Knowing this, you can be comforted that the specialist you do select for the mission is also capable of completing secondary objectives. You do not need a specific trooper to complete secondary objectives. And remember, secondary objectives are just that, secondary. You still need to focus on completing the main objectives. However, secondary objectives, in certain circumstances, allow you to narrow the loss margin or increase the win margin by 1 or more objective points, depending on the mission. That is the end of this video, and it's just something to consider when building lists and playing Infinity. And hopefully, you'll realize that any specialist that you use to complete main objectives can also be used to complete secondary objectives. And sometimes it's probably useful to have, instead of a single trooper that is either a specialist or a category of trooper such as HI or MI, or even veteran or elite. Some of the troopers that were displayed have multiple options, and so the 3 that I gave, for example, are the ones that I do use, and they complete most of the deck. So while they complete main objectives, they also have the option to complete secondary objectives. So it's not like you need a single trooper that is an engineer or a doctor or a heavy infantry or an elite troop. You can pick troopers that have quite a few categories across the board, and then incorporate them in your list, and it should streamline a lot of list building and tailoring it for scenario and objective based missions. So with that, thank you for watching, and may you have a good day.